Welcome back to Common Sense, everybody. I'm Wendy Bell. Walking into a church or a synagogue, a grocery store, or a classroom and carrying a loaded gun with the intent to kill people makes you a crazy person, full stop. Whether you're white or black, a man or a woman, gay, straight, non-binary, loading a gun and taking it somewhere to hurt others, no matter the reason, makes you crazy. Can we agree on this? Because in the media today, the person who pulls the trigger is only worth a headline if they further the left's gun-hating agenda or if they demonize one of the left's enemies. Transgender shooters, by all accounts, just don't fit the narrative. And so their deadly actions that are crazy get covered up by your legacy media. And that is a problem because trans shootings have become far too common. Why is that, do you suppose? Let's welcome back our panel. Dan O'Donnell hosts The Dan O'Donnell Show on News Talk 1130 WISN in Milwaukee. Melanie Collette hosts Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast, New Jersey. And Steve Sanchez hosts the Steve Sanchez Show. I have a hard time with that. KDWN 101.5 FM and 720 AM Las Vegas, Nevada. Dan, let's start with you. I mean, I just think about this as a mom and think about it as a dad, just as a human. A woman walks in with a long rifle in her coat. She opens fire inside Joel Osteen's Texas megachurch. She's shot dead by two off-duty cops working security. Janice Moreno, who also went by the name Jeffrey, was a migrant from El Salvador, had a long rap sheet, history of mental health issues. Police say Palestine was written on her gun. She walked into the church with her own 7-year-old son. What, as a human shield? I don't know. Or because she didn't care about the collateral damage? I mean, how do you see this, Dan, other than it's awful?
Oh, boy, where do I even begin?
I know, right?
It does look as though that terrorism was in some way the motive. I'm not ascribing this to pro-Palestinian terrorism per se, but anytime someone bursts into a crowded place because they're mentally ill or because they're trying to make a political point, their aim is to kill as many people as possible. Fortunately, there were two off-duty cops, good guys with guns, to paraphrase the former NRA chairman Wayne LaPierre. I don't know. I think we have a mental health crisis in this country. I don't know about the immigration status of this woman. It does appear that she was using the child as a human shield. But I mean, I want you to think about the messaging that we're giving people. I don't know if she was identifying as trans, right? But we know that she was a Palestinian supporter. Think about the messaging. The people who oppose the Palestinians are committing a genocide. We're committing a genocide against trans people. If you say something as benign as, hey, men should compete in men's sports and women should compete in women's sports. To the people who are truly mentally ill, they actually internalize that and say, well, I need to stop the genocide, sometimes by any means necessary. And I really do believe there is something to that. Why you're seeing such an outsized percentage of people who identify as trans engaging in these sorts of things. They're already mentally very fragile to begin with, many of them. And I think they're getting the genocide message and taking it literally and trying to stop it.
You know, and Steve, think about the global calls for jihad that we know about. Is this Texas church shooting maybe a case where Christians are being targeted, maybe to Dan's allusion there? Or is the modern LGBTQIA plus movement radicalizing certain activists into terrorists?
You know, I really think it's all of the above. I mean, we do have a mental illness issue. There's no question about it. I do see more radicalization coming out of the LGBTQ. We've seen that. We can't argue or deny that. But the one thing that I think we never want to talk about in this country is evil. Evil walks amongst us. And I think the reason we hide evil is because if we acknowledge evil, we acknowledge there's a Satan. We acknowledge there's a Satan, we acknowledge there's a God. And the leftists today do not like acknowledging that there's a God. When we start having those conversations again, we're going to actually get down to the crux of things and get them fixed. But nobody wants to have that conversation. It's not popular. It's not advertiser friendly. But sometimes we have to do what's not popular.
I don't disagree with you. And Melanie, the Lakewood church shooter was a woman who had maybe identified as a man. Was she trans? I don't know, but it's alarming. The Iowa high school shooter identified as a radical LGBTQ activist. The Nashville shooter identified as trans. Colorado Springs shooter identified as non-binary. The Denver shooter identified as trans. Maryland Rite Aid shooter identified as trans. But the news tells us that we are connecting all the wrong dots.
I was reading a few articles like that, and I certainly saw several that said that the person was indeed not trans. The interesting part was, in this particular sentence, said no matter what she called herself. I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought that we were not allowed to not call you by your dead name, by
Right.
your other, like what? Okay, but so I was
Right.
really thrown by that line in the article that I was reading. But to Steve's point, I absolutely agree that we need to talk more about Satan and evil and the absolutely demonic energy that is surrounding this planet. Because the root cause of all this stuff is that, and those are conversations people don't want to have. But I also think I hate the fact that the first thing that seems to happen after these things happen, when the headlines hit, is it's like transgender person does blah blah blah. To me, I feel like it's similar to like black person does blah blah blah. Like it's really not.
I don't disagree.
Relevant. It's not super relevant to the fact that she, seriously injured and killed folks. Like that's a problem. So I really wish that both sides would not sensationalize this kind of thing, because I don't think it's healthy and I don't think it's good.
Right. And when I searched trans and shooting, to your point, so I just went online and I searched that, I couldn't believe how many of the results came up by fact checkers saying, no, in fact, there's no connection, no uptick in trans shooters opening fire. Dan, I mean, is it propaganda or is it willful deceit? You get the last say here.
Well, I think this is an attempt to, again, try to get us not to believe our lying eyes. Look, we can see that some of the worst mass shootings of the past couple of years were committed by people who identify as non-binary or transgender. That's just a fact. But look at what happened in Nashville. I mean, there was a manifesto that was written by the gun person, the gun they, them. I don't want to be offensive here, I swear. The gun person. I don't remember if they were male identifying, whatever. There was a manifesto that was kept hidden. There was no reason to keep it hidden. There was no reason to suppress it. It was only when it leaked out, and even then it wasn't widely reported on, and it was exactly what I was talking about.
And it has to be talked about. Absolutely. You guys, I appreciate you so much. Nobody should have died. No one should have been hurt. That's exactly what Texas shooter Janice Moreno's neighbors say. They tried to warn their community. Why didn't anybody listen? Coming up next on Common Sense.